It was an unremarkable Tuesday afternoon at the bustling Claridge Mall, where the hum of conversation and the soft chime of background music blended into an unceasing rhythm. Gabriel Brooks, the CEO of one of the most powerful conglomerates in the country, strolled past store displays with the detached air of a man who owned the world, but had lost his curiosity for it. He wasn't here for the shopping or the ambiance. His high-security SUV was parked outside, waiting for him to finish a perfunctory meeting with a potential business partner over coffee. The sharp scent of freshly brewed espresso wafted past him as he crossed the food court. He tugged at his cufflinks, brushing off a sense of impatience. Gabriel's life was all about control, measured, calculated decisions that had built an empire. But as his gaze casually swept the crowd, he froze mid-step, his breath caught in his throat. Across the atrium, a woman with long dark hair stood near a boutique window, her back turned to him. There was something achingly familiar about her, the way she tilted her head, the soft bounce of her laugh as she gestured to two young girls who flanked her. The girls, no older than 10, were carbon copies of one another, identical twins. And yet it wasn't their uncanny resemblance to each other that stunned him. It was their resemblance to him. The girls' piercing blue eyes, the sharp curve of their jaws, even the imperious tilt of their chins. They mirrored the features he saw in the mirror every morning. An inexplicable wave of emotion surged through him, confusion, disbelief, and a haunting pang of regret. His mind raced back to 10 years ago, to a decision he had made in the cold, ruthless fashion he thought was necessary to succeed. He had left her. Lila. Gabriel's hands clenched into fists. She hadn't been part of his plans then. Marriage was a distraction, and love a liability. Or so he'd convinced himself. When he'd walked away, he hadn't looked back. But now, as she turned slightly to guide one of the girls by the shoulder, the sight of her face confirmed it. Time had softened her features, but not erased the fire in her expression. That same fire that had drawn him to her once, and that now, against all reason, burned him with guilt. What were the odds that she would be here, in the same mall on the same day? The odds didn't matter. All that mattered was the truth staring him in the face. The twins were his daughters, and Lila had never told him. Gabriel remained rooted in place, the cacophony of the mall fading into a distant hum. His mind swirled with questions. Why had she kept this secret from him? Did she hate him that much? His world of certainty and order began to unravel as he considered the implications of his discovery. Just then Lila turned fully, her eyes scanning the crowd, their gazes locked. Her expression shifted in an instant, from calm to shocked, then guarded. She didn't smile, didn't wave. Instead, she placed a protective arm around the girls and ushered them toward the escalators. Gabriel's heart pounded as he watched them disappear into the crowd. For the first time in years, he felt powerless, and for the first time ever, he felt afraid. Gabriel Brooks sat in the back seat of his sleek black SUV, his mind a storm of fragmented memories and unresolved questions. The car's interior, usually a cocoon of calm with its soft leather and faint scent of cedarwood, now felt suffocating. He barked at his driver to circle the mall again, his piercing blue eyes scanning every corner for a glimpse of Lila and the girls. But they were gone. The SUV pulled into a quiet side street near his penthouse. Gabriel leaned back in his seat, exhaling sharply. For a man who had spent a decade building unshakable control over his empire, this sudden chaos was unnerving. His assistant, Amelia, messaged him about the meeting he'd skipped, but he ignored it. The twins' faces were seared into his memory. Their resemblance to him was undeniable. His phone buzzed again, but instead of a work email, it was a photo, an image he hadn't looked at in years. Lila's face smiled back at him, radiant and hopeful. She had sent him this picture shortly after their whirlwind wedding, before the arguments, the long business trips, and the walls he'd built between them. Gabriel had saved the photo in a forgotten corner of his cloud storage, but now it felt like a wound reopening. He closed his eyes and allowed the memories to flood in. Lila had been a free spirit when they'd met, an artist with a mind full of dreams. She wasn't part of his world of contracts and quarterly profits, and that had been her allure. For a brief moment, she'd made him believe in something bigger than success. But when the pressures of his company intensified, He'd chosen ambition over love. Gabriel opened his eyes, jaw tightening. He wasn't the same man he'd been a decade ago. Or was he? The following morning, Gabriel's determination crystallized. He wasn't going to let this go unanswered. After a restless night, he instructed Amelia to dig into Lila's life. The directive was clear, but cloaked in a facade of detachment. Find out everything. By mid-afternoon, the results came in. Amelia handed him a slim folder, her expression carefully neutral. Lila Carter, Amelia began as Gabriel flipped through the documents. She moved to Boston after your divorce. She's been working as a gallery curator. The twins, Ivy and Ella, are her daughters. They're 10 years old. 10 years. The timeline hit him like a punch to the gut. He closed the folder and leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. Ivy and Ella were born shortly after he walked away. He gripped the edge of his desk, a surge of anger rising. How could Lila have kept this from him? Was it revenge? Or had she simply believed he wouldn't care? Later that week, Gabriel found himself parked outside the gallery where Lila worked. The modest brick building was worlds away from the towering skyscrapers he frequented. He hesitated, fingers drumming the steering wheel. He wasn't ready to confront her, not yet. Instead, he stepped into the gallery quietly, blending in with a small crowd admiring the paintings. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on her. Lila was mid-conversation with a patron, her voice calm and confident. Her hair was tied loosely, strands framing her face in the way he remembered. She looked radiant. Gabriel's chest tightened as he watched her. For years, he'd buried the thought of her under layers of work, power, and wealth. But now the sight of her stirred something dormant, regret perhaps, or guilt. She glanced his way, her smile faltering when their eyes met. "Excuse me," she murmured to the patron, stepping toward him. Her posture was straight, her expression unreadable. "What are you doing here, Gabriel?" she asked, her voice low but steady. He searched for the right words, but they failed him. Instead, he blurted, "Why didn't you tell me?" Lila's eyes hardened. "Tell you what? That I was pregnant when you walked away. That I raised 2 daughters while you chased your empire. You made your choice, Gabriel. You left." Her words cut deeper than he'd anticipated. "I deserve to know," he said, his voice rising. "They're my daughters, too." Lila shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "You think knowing would have changed anything? You were too busy being the almighty Gabriel Brooks. You didn't want a family then, and I wasn't going to beg you to care." Silence stretched between them, the weight of their shared history pressing down. Finally, Lila stepped back, her voice softening. "They don't know about you, and I intend to keep it that way." Gabriel's stomach churned. "You can't do that. They deserve to know their father." Lila's gaze was unwavering. "They deserve stability, love. I gave them that. You? You left us behind without a second thought." The words stung because they were true, but Gabriel wasn't the kind of man to give up. "I'll fight for them, Lila," he said, his voice a quiet promise. "I won't walk away this time." Her lips parted as if to retort, but she closed them, shaking her head instead. Without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving Gabriel standing in the middle of the gallery. As he exited the building, his mind was already formulating a plan. He wasn't sure what winning back their trust would look like, or if it was even possible, but for the first time in years, his focus wasn't on a business merger or a billion-dollar deal. It was on 2 little girls with blue eyes who had no idea who he was, and on the woman who still haunted him. Gabriel stared at the city skyline from his penthouse, the glass of whiskey in his hand untouched. The view was immaculate, a testament to his success, but for the first time it felt meaningless. The conversation with Lila replayed in his mind, her words a brutal indictment of the choices he had made. He hadn't anticipated the wall of resistance she'd built, nor the fierce protectiveness she showed toward Claire and Ella. Yet he couldn't shake the image of the girls, his daughters, and the life they had led without him. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. Amelia had sent him a detailed schedule of the girls' activities, extracted through means he didn't want to question. Piano lessons on Thursdays, soccer practice on Saturdays. Their school was a prestigious private institution, not far from the gallery. It was clear Lila had spared no effort in giving them a good life, but the more Gabriel learned, the more complicated his emotions became. He had expected to find evidence of struggle or hardship, something to justify stepping in as their father. Instead, he found stability. They didn't need him, not in the way he thought they would. Yet the ache of being excluded from their lives gnawed at him. The following Saturday, Gabriel found himself parked near the soccer field. He watched from a distance as Ella, clad in a bright red jersey, darted across the grass, her twin cheering from the sidelines. Lila was there too, her laughter ringing out as she encouraged the girls. Gabriel felt like an outsider looking in, a man observing a life that could have been his. He knew he couldn't linger in the shadows forever. The time to act was now. The confrontation came sooner than expected. Lila spotted him as she walked toward her car, the twins skipping ahead. Her smile disappeared, replaced by a steely resolve. She approached him, keeping her distance, her arms crossed. "Are you stalking us now?" she asked, her tone sharp but quiet enough not to draw attention. "I'm trying to understand them," Gabriel replied, his voice calm but firm. "I've missed 10 years. I won't miss any more." Lila glanced toward the girls who were now climbing into the back seat, oblivious to the tension brewing between their parents. "They don't need you complicating their lives, Gabriel. They're happy. They're my daughters," he said. The words weighted with emotion. "I have a right to know them." Her eyes flashed with anger. "You forfeited that right when you left." Gabriel stepped closer, lowering his voice. "And I'll spend the rest of my life making up for it, but I won't walk away again." Lila's lips pressed into a thin line. "You don't get to decide that. They're not pawns in your quest for redemption." For a moment they stood in silence, their unspoken history hanging heavily between them. Finally Lila sighed, her shoulders slumping. "If you want to know them, it has to be on my terms. Slowly. They've had 10 years without you. Don't think you can waltz in and play the hero." Gabriel nodded, sensing this was the closest thing to an olive branch he'd get. "Tell me where to start." Lila's terms were clear: no grand gestures, no sudden appearances. Gabriel would meet Claire and Ella gradually, introduced as a friend of their mother. It felt like a demotion, but he agreed. This wasn't about his pride, it was about them. The first meeting took place at a small cafe near their school. Gabriel arrived early, his nerves fraying. He had faced hostile boardrooms, media scrutiny, and billion-dollar negotiations, yet nothing compared to the anticipation of seeing his daughters up close. When Lila arrived with the twins, Gabriel's heart raced. Claire and Ella were full of energy, their voices overlapping as they recounted their day. Gabriel watched them closely, marveling at their distinct personalities. Ella was animated and outgoing, while Claire seemed more reserved, observing her surroundings with a quiet intensity. "Girls, this is Gabriel," Lila said, her tone measured. "He's an old friend of mine." Claire tilted her head curiously. "Hi," she said politely, her voice soft. Ella, on the other hand, grinned. "Do you like chocolate croissants?" "They're my favorite." Gabriel chuckled, taken aback by her openness. "I do, especially with extra chocolate." Ella beamed, but Claire remained cautious, her eyes flicking between Gabriel and her mother. He didn't push, letting the girls dictate the pace of the conversation. The meeting ended without incident, but as Lila ushered the girls out, she turned to Gabriel. "Don't get your hopes up. This is just the beginning." Over the next few weeks, Gabriel worked tirelessly to build a connection with the twins. He attended their soccer games, dropped by the gallery under the guise of casual visits, and learned the nuances of their interests. Slowly but surely, Ella warmed to him, her bubbly nature making it easy for her to embrace new relationships. Claire, however, remained a challenge. One afternoon as they walked through a park, Claire tugged on Lila's sleeve and whispered something. Lila knelt, nodding gently before turning to Gabriel. "She wants to know why you're always around now," Lila said quietly. "I told you this would happen." Gabriel crouched to meet Claire's gaze. "I'm here because I care about your mom," he said carefully, "and because I think you and your sister are amazing." Claire frowned, her young mind processing his words. "Did you know us when we were little?" she asked. Gabriel hesitated, glancing at Lila for guidance. She gave him a small nod. "No," he admitted, "but I wish I had." Claire studied him for a moment before reaching for Ella's hand. "Come on," she said, pulling her sister toward the playground. Lila sighed as they walked away. She's not like Ella. It'll take time. I'm not going anywhere, Gabriel replied. But just as Gabriel began to feel he was making progress, the past came roaring back in the form of an unexpected visitor. One evening, as he returned to his penthouse, he found a man waiting in the lobby, a man he recognized immediately, Ethan Taylor, Lila's longtime friend and confidant. Ethan's expression was unreadable, but his words were cutting. I know what you're doing, Gabriel, and I won't let you hurt them. Gabriel's jaw tightened. This isn't your decision. Ethan stepped closer. You've already done enough damage. Don't you dare think you can waltz back into their lives and play the good guy. The confrontation left Gabriel shaken. He realized that earning his daughter's trust wasn't his only battle. He would have to prove himself to everyone, Lila included, if he hoped to rebuild the family he'd abandoned. And as Ethan walked away, one question lingered. Was he too late? Gabriel stepped into the cool evening air outside his penthouse, Ethan Taylor's parting words echoing in his mind. The confrontation had shaken him, not because Ethan was wrong, but because he was right. Gabriel had left devastation in his wake. Fixing it wouldn't be as simple as showing up. It would require something he wasn't accustomed to giving: vulnerability. For days, Gabriel wrestled with his emotions. His daughter's laughter, their shy smiles, and even Ivy's guarded demeanor haunted him. They were the first cracks in his carefully constructed armor. Ethan's challenge, though bitter, had forced him to confront an unsettling truth. His wealth and power meant nothing if the people he cared about didn't trust him. That weekend, Gabriel arrived unannounced at the gallery. It was a risky move, but he needed to speak to Lila without pretense. She was standing near a canvas, her fingers brushing over a vibrant stroke of blue, lost in her work. For a moment he hesitated. She looked peaceful, content in a way that only deepened his guilt. Lila, he called softly, breaking the spell. She turned, surprise flashing across her face before she crossed her arms defensively. What are you doing here, Gabriel? I need to talk, he said, his tone uncharacteristically gentle. Please. Lila's expression hardened, but after a long pause she gestured toward the back room. They stepped inside, the quiet hum of the gallery fading behind them. I'm listening, she said, leaning against a table. Gabriel took a deep breath. I know I have no right to ask for anything, but I can't keep pretending this doesn't matter. Ivy and Ella. He stopped, the words catching in his throat. They matter, and so do you. Lila's eyes narrowed. Don't you dare make this about me. You had your chance, Gabriel. You walked away. I know, he said, his voice breaking slightly, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life, but I want to make it right. Lila shook her head, frustration evident in her posture. You don't just get to decide that. This isn't some deal you can negotiate. The girls have a life, a good one. They don't need you barging in and turning everything upside down. Gabriel stepped closer, his gaze earnest. I'm not here to take anything away from them. I want to be part of their lives. I want to earn their trust, and yours. Lila laughed bitterly. Trust? You think you can just... I'm not the man I was, he interrupted. I've spent years running from everything that reminded me of you, of them, but I can't run anymore. For a moment the room was silent. Lila's defenses wavered, her eyes softening as she looked at him. It's not that simple, she said quietly. They've never known you. Ivy barely even talks about her feelings. And Ella? She's young. She doesn't understand what it means to have a father. What happens when you disappoint them? Gabriel swallowed hard. I won't. Lila held his gaze, searching for something. Certainty, perhaps, or sincerity. Finally, she sighed. If you want to be in their lives, you have to show me you're serious. And that starts with Ivy. The following week, Gabriel found himself at the twins' soccer practice. Ella greeted him with her usual enthusiasm, chattering about her latest game strategy. But Ivy remained distant. He stayed at the edge of the field, watching as the girls played, searching for an opening to connect with his more reserved daughter. After practice, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Gabriel saw his chance. Ivy was sitting on a bench, lacing her sneakers with deliberate focus. He approached slowly, careful not to startle her. Hi, Ivy, he said, his voice soft. She looked up, her expression unreadable. Hi, I was watching your game, he continued. You're really good at defense. You've got great instincts. Ivy shrugged. Thanks. Gabriel sat down beside her, leaving enough space to respect her boundaries. When I was your age, I wasn't very good at soccer, he admitted. I tripped over the ball more times than I'd like to admit. A small smile tugged at her lips, though she quickly suppressed it. Really? Really, he said, leaning in conspiratorially. My coach said I had 2 left feet. Ivy giggled softly, and the sound warmed Gabriel's heart. Encouraged, he continued. Do you like playing? She nodded. It's fun, and Ella always cheers for me, even when I mess up. Gabriel hesitated, then asked, Do you ever cheer for her? Ivy's face lit up. All the time. She's the fastest runner on the team. Gabriel smiled. You're a good sister. Ivy looked at him, her expression more open than before. Do you have a sister? He shook his head. No, but I always wanted one. She seemed to consider this, then asked, Why do you come to our games? Gabriel's chest tightened. Because I like watching you and Ella. You're amazing, both of you. Ivy studied him for a moment, her young eyes wiser than her years. Mum says you're her friend. Gabriel nodded slowly. I am, but I'd like to be your friend too. Ivy didn't respond right away. Instead, she looked down at her shoes, her fingers fiddling with the laces. Finally, she said, Maybe, but you have to come to more games. I wouldn't miss them for the world, he promised. As the weeks passed, Gabriel's persistence began to pay off. Ivy opened up more, sharing stories about school and her favorite books. Ella remained her cheerful self, embracing Gabriel with the ease of a child who saw only the present. Lila, too, began to soften, though she remained cautious. But just as things seemed to settle, an unexpected event threatened to unravel everything. During a routine doctor's visit, Ivy fainted in the waiting room. The incident sent shockwaves through the family, and Gabriel rushed to the hospital, his heart pounding with fear. Tests revealed that Ivy had a minor heart condition, manageable but requiring careful monitoring. In the sterile light of the hospital room, Gabriel sat by Ivy's bedside, guilt weighing heavily on him. I should have been here, he whispered to Lila. I should have known. Lila placed a hand on his shoulder, her own fears evident in her eyes. You're here now, she said softly. That's what matters. As Ivy recovered, Gabriel's role in her life solidified. He attended every appointment, researched treatments, and supported Lila through the ordeal. It was during one quiet evening, as the four of them sat together at home, that Ivy asked the question Gabriel had been dreading. Are you my dad? The room fell silent. Lila looked at Gabriel, her expression a mix of apprehension and encouragement. Taking a deep breath, he met Ivy's gaze. Yes, he said, his voice steady. I am. Ivy studied him for a long moment before nodding. Okay, it wasn't an embrace or a declaration of love, but it was a start. In the months that followed, Gabriel rebuilt what he had lost piece by piece. The road wasn't easy. Trust took time and forgiveness even longer. But as he stood in the crowd at the twins' school recital, watching Ivy and Ella perform a duet, he realized that he'd found something far more valuable than the empire he had built. A family. And this time, he wasn't letting go. This story is about the journey of Gabriel Brooks, a man who once chose power and ambition over family, only to realize the true value of love and connection. An unexpected encounter with Lila Carter and their twin daughters, Ivy and Ella, forces him to face the mistakes of his past and seek redemption. Through relentless effort, Gabriel learns that wealth cannot replace the time spent with loved ones, and trust must be rebuilt through sincerity. Family is the most precious treasure, and no amount of success can compensate for its loss. Healing relationships requires courage to face the pain, acknowledge mistakes, and patiently rebuild from the ground up. What do you think about this story? Do you believe Gabriel deserves forgiveness? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to hit like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe to our channel for more meaningful stories.